Matt Conant. Nicholas McKelly.
Here.
Bruce Johnson.
Here.
Bill Conley.
Here.
Todd Kimmelshoe.
Here.
Mark Boomgarden.
Here.
Wade Kirchner.
Present.
Charlie Hoppin.
Yes.
Drew Stresser. Mike Morris.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll please rise. We'll have Todd Kimmelshoe lead us in a flag salute, please.
Salute. Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public comment. Members of the public will be allowed to address the Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency Board of Directors on items of interest to the public that are within the subject matter and jurisdiction of the board, and any member of the audience who may wish to bring the matter before the board and has not been placed on the agenda may do so at this time. However, state law prohibits that no action may be taken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. Any public comment? Seeing none, moving on to consent calendar. Consent calendar consists of groups of items together, those items which are considered non-controversial or for which prior discretion may have been given to staff and only require routine action by the board. The chair may advise the audience that the matter may be adopted in one total motion. However, the board may, at its option or upon the request of a member of the public, consider any matter separately. Okay. And do we have a motion for the consent calendar?
Move to approve.
Second.
And that's 1 through 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Moving 1 through 4. Wade and Michael. All in favor?
Aye.
Are we going to do a roll call? No? Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Motion passed unanimously. Okay. Then, President, Zeth.
Seth.
Know what he said?
I think you said Zach. That's Seth. Yeah. That's good.
Hi, good afternoon.
I don't hear very well.
Neither do I, so.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Conan, members of the board. Seth Rosell with LWA, Agency's Budget Manager. This is our regular monthly financial report. So we're moving right ahead to June, month ending June. We didn't have a meeting in July, and so the last time the board's seen this was a presentation for month ending April. So we just moved straight to June. The monthly financial report for both May and June is in the board packet. Ending the month of the fiscal year unaudited, we're about $28.8 million. There's some accrued expenses and revenues, and so bringing that down to about $28.6 million in working capital. We've received our full assessments for the year. $750,000 of our assessments goes into our operating fund. The capital revenue for the year, including both grant revenues and the capital portion of the assessment, we have about $16.6 million to date, 15.6 as of June 30. So another $930,000 of revenues for capital fund revenues that are pending and accrued. And so once we get our audited financial statements, majority of those will be included. And so we're showing about a $1.18 million increase in revenue from the last meeting in June that took place. This is a table that shows all the $930,000 of pending revenues from the state, and I'm showing here on this same slide in this area our assessment collections as well as our capital revenues. So we've received assessments of about $6.4 million, which to date there could be some additional accruals going forward, but that's our revenue for the year. In the capital side, and then another $750,000 on the operating side. Okay, so in terms of our expenditures, the total expenditures for the fiscal year to date, about $6.3 million. That's an additional of about $563,000 from the last report in April, and those expenditures are primarily related to the various OWA-related projects, as well as the Feather River West Levee Phase 2 project, the Tudor Flood Risk Reduction Project, the environmental review and design work, another $184,000. Our next debt service payment is due on October 1st, so that payment will be made fairly soon, a deposit with our trustee, and that's a portion of our capital revenues will be used to make that debt service payment going forward. Okay. This slide I updated a little bit. I wanted to give the board a flavor of the other financial related activities, and we've got quite a few grants now, a lot of different grants. There are obviously our main grant that we're working to close out with DWR, the Urban Flood Risk Reduction Program / Early Implementation Program grant. We're working to close out that grant and do final payment reviews, finalizing all our quarterly reports, and that grant will fully be closed out once all the right-of-way transfers, and that's taking place on a regular going forward basis. For the Orville Wildlife Area Complex of projects, Thermalito After Bay, Robinson's Riffle, et cetera, there are 5 different grants that we're working and administering. We're working on those. Some of them are in various stages of being closed out. Some are new grants that haven't started yet, so we're setting up the tracking and all the process for those 5 different grants with Wildlife Conservation Board, CDFW, and DWR. I believe Michael will get into some of those in more detail in his program project update, some of the newer grants. With the Small Communities Flood Risk Reduction Grant, the Tudor study that was extended, we're continuing work on that, processing payments and working with the county on that process. The California Natural Resources Agency grant for sediment removal, we're processing payments and processing invoice packages. There's also a new grant that we've talked about quite a bit on the Sutter Bypass East Levee project. We're setting that project counting up and processing the initial reports and setting up the process for tracking and administering that grant with DWR. And then another grant we just executed recently and are setting up the tracking on is the shifting back to Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency for the Feather River Regional Flood Management Plan grant, the Phase 4 grant. We're getting that up and going and preparing the initial packages for that. So there's quite a bit of activity in the background. That's what makes up that long list of payments on the prior slide. With respect to our assessment, we've been working on the coordination with Wildan on assessment administration for Sutter Butte as well as the Feather River West Levee Financing Authority. The assessment rolls will be submitted to the counties in the case of Sutter Butte, Butte, and Sutter County. In the case of Fralifa, just Sutter County. Those will be submitted by the 10th. That's the deadline for direct charge submissions to the county. And we're working through the regional levy impact fee implementation. Michael will get into more detail on the status of that. I think during this meeting, or he's done that in the past, but their next meeting will be with Sutter County on August 22nd, and then we're setting up a meeting with Butte County in September, as well as Live Oak. And then some outreach with the development community with Yuba City in September as well. And then we've already kicked off our audit for fiscal year ending June 30, 2023. We've had our entrance interview, and then we'll work through compiling all the documents and getting that over to auditor. And typically that process will end in December. We use the same auditor as the city, and the preference and the priority is with the city, which is fine with us. So that concludes my financial report. If there's any questions or inquiries on the materials prepared that are in the packet or on the presentation, happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Zeth? Seeing none. No. Okay. Zeth, I did have one. So you said revenues were up by 1.5 million?
Relative to the last presentation that I made back.
Right. And is that mostly due to grants or revenue in grants?
Processing, yeah. We had already accounted for the last apportionment in April, the larger apportionment of property tax revenues, assessment revenues. It's primarily related to additional payments that and requests and claims we've made against our grants.
Cool. Thank you. Seeing none, any other questions? No. Okay. So Michael, you're on deck.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Michael Bissett here, Executive Director. Hope you appreciated your month off last month. We didn't have any action items, so we chose not to have a meeting. And so that's why we're here this month. We had some good action items to keep our program moving forward here. I wanted to update the board on a lot of the activities we're working on. So Feather River West Levee Project 1, you know, that's our large project that we're winding down on. We're still closing out on environmental and cultural resources mitigation. The cultural resources is essentially completed now. And then on the environmental mitigation, the two sites that we have in VELB mitigation is the Matthews and the Star Bend site. We're getting very close to finalizing that process. Andrea and I are working closely with both LD1 and an attorney helping us through the process and our resource agency partners to finalize that process. On right-of-way transfers, we're also getting close to the end there as well. We have one remainder property up in Yuba City that is causing a delay on finalizing our record of survey. We can't complete that until everything is completed on the acquisition. But it's not a issue with negotiations or anything like that. It's just process, just getting the documents signed. So everything is good. We just need to get those documents in. Lastly, I don't have it here, but an issue popped up just within the last couple of weeks with Levee District 1. They went out to clean and maintain some of the relief wells that we constructed as part of the Feather River West Levee project, and they found out that they were plugged with sediment. So we're in the due diligence stage. We're trying to gather information to figure out how they got plugged, you know, what the cause was, how do we rectify that. So we're working very closely with LD1 and their consultant right now. This will probably be an item that'll come back to the board and this agency to rectify because it looks like it's probably a latent deficiency type issue. Maybe one of the screens broke or there was some other issue with construction. It's well beyond the warranty period, unfortunately, because these were installed back in like 2015. So it's something that we're going to have to work with LD1 to rectify. So once I get more information, I'll bring that back to the board probably next month. On Feather River West Levee Project 2, our Tudor flood risk reduction project, that's the lower 1.6 miles just west of the Highway 99 bridge. We're advancing from 65% to 90% design. We've completed our AB 52 cultural resources consultations with the United Auburn Indian community, and those negotiations went well. So that process is completed. We're finalizing our CEQA document, the EIR, and we'll be taking that final EIR to the board next month for certification. So that'll be the big item coming next month. We'll do a small presentation on that. So that's a real milestone for that project. Also, we've submitted all the documents required for the 408 review process with the Army Corps. That process is now starting with the Army Corps, so they'll be reviewing our project documents. And once again, I've reminded the board, this could take, 12 to 18 months to get through that process of getting Corps review and approval for the project. Authorization, they call it 408 authorization to go in and modify a federal project levy. So that process is just kicking off. So we're advancing the project there. We're also, Chris and I will be working on looking for opportunities for future funding to actually construct the project when we're ready to construct, hopefully in 2025. So we're going to be looking and going after state and or federal grants for the project. Next slide, please. Sutter Bypass East Levee project, it's similar in nature to the Tudor flood risk reduction project. It's behind, it's not at the same stage. We started that project later. We're advancing that with the $4 million grant from DWR. And Seth mentioned that, his company were setting up the books essentially to start administering that grant. So we'll be submitting quarterly reports and reimbursement requests to the state to help cost share in that project. Our design team have completed the design criteria report. They finalized a draft alternatives analysis report to figure out, what is the actual remediation that is needed for that levee. We'll be submitting that to DWR for their review, and we're setting up some meetings with the state to discuss some of the design parameters for the project. We just received our 408 approval to go out there and do our geotechnical explorations. So we're going to start that later this month. There's already some geotech work on that Sutter Bypass East Levee, but we're going to go out and acquire additional data. For the Orville Wildlife Area Robinson's Riffle project, so we're utilizing that $1.1 million planning grant from DWR. We've conducted a good amount of meetings now with stakeholders in the region to gather input on what various entities would like to see happen out there in the Orville Wildlife Area. Most notably, we're working with DWR, the Orville field staff out there, CDFW, who manages the property, and then a lot of the recreational groups and other groups that are out there that have interests in that area. So we're gathering all of that input to advance towards alternatives analysis and final project design. We're also, one of the items that the board approved on the consent was a grant with CDFW. It's actually a federal grant from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that's wheeled through CDFW, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So that grant is for the boat ramp and campground project at the Thermalito Afterbay. So that was a $3.3 million grant, and then you add that to the $4.4 million WCB grant. So we have a total of $7.7 million for that project. So that is for everything. So that's for design, permitting, and construction. So that project is underway. We held a field meeting with all the stakeholders, the grantors, and the end users of that site. So that was a really good meeting, and now we're starting to advance into the design process and environmental documentation and permitting process. The next item, sediment removal project. Tara put out flyers for everybody. This is a marketing piece essentially for the sediment removal project. We're going to use this in our advocacy outreach to gather additional funding for the project. As the board is aware, we've completed phase 1. We have the permits in hand for phase 2. We just don't have the construction funding, which we estimate around $10 million would pretty much remove that island basically at the confluence of the Feather and the Yuba. We're going to be setting up a meeting with Senator Nielo to discuss this project and discuss possible state funding. We're also pursuing a federal grant through NOAA to see if we can get federal funding for the project. Chris and I had a really positive meeting with their staff, their grant staff, who were pretty accepting of the project and thought it was a good project, and we'll be working with them to submit our grant in September. So we're doing everything we can to identify and pursue funding for the project. And so I'll keep the board aware of where we're at in that process. On the regional flood management planning, that's a state grant through DWR. These are all the projects that we're advancing through that. It's not a lot of money, but we're able to participate in a lot of these projects and advance the projects and apply for grant monies by using this grant. So we're sort of paying ourselves through the planning grant to apply for additional grants. So it's a real positive situation. It's a real good use of that planning money to advance all of these interests for Sbfca and the Feather River region. One of the successes was the last item there, the Feather River West Levee Financing Agency. Not only did we help establish that agency, but get that Prop 218 election successfully passed. And they're actually going to be submitting the first roll for an assessment this month. And that'll be the first time that that agency submits through their assessment district, and Levy District 1 and Levy District 9 will reap the proceeds from that and be able to properly operate and maintain the levees moving forward into the future. So real positive aspects of that grant. Next slide, please.
Michael, before you go on to
Yes,
the next slide,
absolutely.
ask a question.
Yes.
On the, there it is, on the Orville Wildlife Area, Robinson's Riffle, when do you expect to really break ground on that, do you think, to really start the work?
So this planning study is probably a year to 18 months to get through all of that outreach and planning and then get into design. So we already have the design grant, which is listed there, that $2.1 million CDFW. So once we have the preferred alternative selected through the planning process, we'll advance into design. And, Chris, I would guess 2 to 3 years that we would get through that process. But then in the meantime, we're going to be applying for grants to construct the project, because we're probably looking at a $40 to $50 million construction cost for the project. So, yeah.
And the only reason I ask that is because, I always think we don't pat ourselves on the back enough. And so when the time comes, it could be 2, 3, 4 years down the road. I'd love to have some big, ceremony with everybody there to, pat ourselves on the back that look at what we're doing, and we're coordinating with, with the state of California and working on these things. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a long ways down.
Maybe we'll hold that at the Connolly campground that we'll be constructing, right?
Campground and boat.
Combat fishing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Combat fishing.
Mike, can I ask one question also? You mentioned about the sediment removal that there was grants available from NOAA, you said?
Correct.
So NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmosphere, really?
Correct.
So and I'm happy to take their money, but I'm just curious, how do they justify using, because the water flows to the ocean, or how,
I think it's a fish passage type grant, right, Chris? Maybe you want to get up and talk about it a little bit. Chris has a little bit more.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to take it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All
Go
right,
ahead,
can you
Mike.
hear me okay?
Oh.
Yep. Yeah, so we've been really trying to stress the importance of the removal of that sediment in regards to fish passage. And you could really see it during the times of drought when the flows were real low and you could basically walk across the Feather River. And so we're working with NorCal Guides to basically coordinate our message to agencies like NOAA in that regard, where when you have these times of low flow and I'm not a biologist, but I almost kind of think of them as like rest stops, some of these holding pools as fish migrate, up or downstream. If you don't have any of those, you could kind of see how that could be an impediment. And so that is essentially part of the pitch for how we're kind of going after some of that NOAA fisheries funding.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, this is my last slide here. So City of Orville levee repair. So we had a good, successful meeting at the city last week. The city council approved the services agreement. So we're going to be advancing that project. The next step is to now scope out a task order and budget. The city needs to identify some budget that they can advance the project with. So good news there. So once we've scoped out, the next task order and have a budget established, I'll be taking that back to the board for approval. But it's essentially, it'll be funded by the city until we get other grants or other revenue sources to fund that project. So more to come on that. The federal project. So this is a big item here for this month to let the board know what's happening. I've been talking about this for, almost 2 years now, closing out that federal project, the Army Corps' 5 Mile project, and getting all the punch list work completed. There's one outstanding punch list item that has yet to be completed, and that's on the Feather Water District vaults. So there's these vaults that have meters in them. It's for their irrigation facilities. The project built brand new piping up and over the levee, installed new meters and valves, put those structures within vaults to protect them. Unfortunately, the vaults are leaking. So they're on the land side of the levee. There's a raised reservoir, and the head pressure from that reservoir is pushing the water out through the earthen embankment, and it's getting inside the vaults. And it shouldn't be. And the Corps has tried to work with their contractor to rectify that situation. They've been unsuccessful. And essentially, they've thrown their hands up, the Corps has, and said, we don't have any more means to go after the contractor, either legally or contractually. They've already accepted the work. They just positioned themselves in a real bad situation. So the non-federal sponsors in the project are the state and Sbfca. And collectively, along with the Corps, we feel it's the best situation moving forward would be to have Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency come in, design the repairs, hire a contractor, and manage that repair of those facilities so that Feather Water District is made whole. So we're in the process of scoping that out, seeing what work needs to be done, what the budget would be, and how that would be paid for through the existing project funding that the Corps is holding right now. So they would figure out a way to pass on that money to Sbfca to make those repairs happen. So I don't need an action item from the board this month. I'm hoping that the board thinks that that's probably the best way to move forward to help our local partner or Feather Water District get made whole from this whole project. I think I'll stop there and let our attorney, one of the obvious issues when we look at something like this is liability. So Sbfca coming in, making repairs, what is our liability moving forward? Is there risk? How big is that risk? And so we've vetted that through with our legal counsel, and I'll let Andrea talk about that.
Hi, good afternoon. So with the understanding that we're in open session and not in closed session, where it would be, usually we talk more in depth about things like liability. The Sutter Butte Flood Control Agency is already a non-federal sponsor for the original project, and as such already carries a certain amount of liability along with the Corps and the other non-federal sponsor with respect to the original work. So while, yes, there is some vulnerability that Sbfca would have going forward in doing this work, just like it does with any work it does, it doesn't appear that much above and beyond what we may already carry with respect to the project, which appears to have a problem. And so it's not nothing, but it's not substantially more than what we already carry. And I'd be happy to go into more detail, maybe in closed session, if the board wants to do that in the future.
I'll ask a question, and if you'd rather wait till closed session, that's fine. But would we be well advised from a liability standpoint, Andrea, to have in hand a letter from the Corps saying they're throwing their hands up and they can't do anything where they were originally responsible for it? It just seems like if we had a liability issue in the future, on one hand, we've got the Corps with their hands up saying we don't know what to do,
Yes, in that the narrative would certainly be better for Sbfca going forward, were we to have something in writing that says, hey, the Corps somehow, acknowledged that there was a problem and wasn't able to, or chose not to, or whatever happened, go after a contractor for it. I do think we're better positioned in that perspective. I don't know to the extent that exists, but certainly that would help with the narrative.
Yeah, we don't currently have that. I think that's an excellent idea, Charlie, and that's something we could work to get from the Army Corps.
Michael, I know that the Corps has already kind of told you that. Was that on the email or was that
It was in a Zoom meeting.
a Zoom meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so more to come on that one. On the federal crediting side of things, we're still working with Sbfca. Well, we're still working with the Army Corps to perfect that credit. That process is going to take a while. We thought it was going to be completed in 2024. The Corps has now laid out a schedule that shows it rolling into 2025 for them to review, make all the reviews and approvals through, their division, headquarters, and then the ASA, Assistant Secretary of the Army, has to go through all those layers to allow that credit to be transferred over to another agency. So that's going on. And at the same time, we're working with Sbfca to actually purchase our credit once it is perfected. So we have a meeting set up for later this month, just amongst staff, to get back into negotiations now that they've had their successful Prop 218 election and they've gone out and issued some bonds. They now have some money. They're putting a proposal together and they're going to present that to us at the end of this month. So I'll have more information when I come before the board in September. Let's see. I know we're getting close to time here. On the regional development impact fee standpoint, we've had a lot of good progress made over the past 2 to 3 months. So City of Gridley was the first to pass the regional development impact fee. That was done in May, and then Biggs passed it in July. And now we have, we've had really good communications with all the other member land use agencies. So we have Sutter County will consider approval later this month on the 22nd. And City of Live Oak in September on the 20th. Butte County in September on the 26th. And finally, Yuba City will consider approval probably in October. We're looking to set a date there for their city council to take that on. So it's all moving into place here, and that'll allow this agency to have a revenue source. It's a one-time fee on new development, to have that revenue source moving into the future, to continue certifications of the levy, dealing with issues that pop up over time, sort of like this relief well issue I just mentioned earlier, things like that. So, and then also continuing the mission of the strategic plan and building out the rest of the project. So a lot of progress being made there. On the last bullet, this just came up recently. I'm not sure if everybody's aware. It was this Sutter Energy Center is here in Yuba City. It's a Calpine gas-powered electricity producing site. And they're looking at installing a carbon capture and storage project. It was in the Sacramento Bee and the Appeal Democrat. It's a $1 billion estimated investment in infrastructure, and it's being protected by the levees that we're looking to improve, right? So it's here within the basin. So I don't know much about the actual project itself, but the item that they're investing $1 billion, that's going to help us, this agency, advance the repairs that we need to make on the Sutter Bypass and the Lower Feather River, because it justifies the investment in improving the flood protection project to protect these assets. Not only this new project, but the existing assets. But this just pushes it way beyond from a benefit cost ratio perspective from what we had in the past. So it was a really interesting meeting. Barbara LeVake set that up. She works for Calpine, and we spoke with their project manager. So Chris and I are going to be coordinating with them as they advance that project, because the actual pipeline goes right through the 5-mile Sutter Bypass project that we're in design on right now. So it's perfect time that we are made aware of the project, just from an infrastructure standpoint, but also we're going to look to partner with Calpine as we research state and federal grants to do the levee repairs along the Sutter Bypass East Levee. So it was very, very interesting, very opportune for this agency, I believe. We're going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I wish I probably should have called you before my meeting with Senator Nilo this morning, but I should have brought that up. I didn't even think about it, but I mean, I'm sure that Barbara LeVake has already mentioned it to him, and so yeah, we could definitely use that.
Yeah.
Moving forward with the rest of the levy, possibly.
Yeah, that's going to really help justify. Yep.
Michael, not to be a naysayer on this, but I've been through the same dog and pony show that you went through and cookies and iced tea at Barbara's house. The one thing we need to be mindful of is that carbon dioxide is going to be piped into the Sutter Basin and deep injected into ground. So there's going to be eminent domain. And when you talk to their consultants, everything's going to be fine. There's not going to be anything that's going to be a problem with it, but they don't want to put it in the ground near their plant. And I would just be mindful of that. I don't know how much of an uproar there's going to be over that, but I know if it happens to wind up on something that I have down there, I'm not going to be real happy about it, because it's easy for those guys to say, well, it's going to go far enough into the earth, it's not going to cause any trouble. And we've all seen things to the contrary along the way. So just so you're mindful of that. I can see the advantages, but there may be an uproar.
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, it's a very controversial project because there's a lot of environmentalists who want to see these gas-powered plants dissolved and not utilized anymore, and make an investment like this is contrary to their desires. I could see that. But we're going to take advantage of it as best we can. They are utilizing, it was interesting, they're utilizing they have an existing pipeline. So they're utilizing that alignment. So they have the property rights already to construct this brand new pipe within their existing easement, either whether it's easements or in fee where they have their existing pipe. So it'll be interesting to see how it rolls forward. But
I don't think it's going to be where they have their existing pipe, because that goes to the west of the plant, and the map I shows it going to the south. And they may have an easement for something that they anticipated doing, but it's not next to their existing pipe.
yeah, I have a PowerPoint slide just on paper. I'll show you right after this meeting. It goes southwest. Yeah, and it goes outside of our basin. Yep.
Good.
That's the last item I had. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, and see if there's other questions.
I thought you raised your hand. No. Okay. Oh, that was a stretch. Okay. Anyway, any other questions for Michael?
I just had a quick comment through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael, I appreciate you putting this together, and I also appreciate your patience on getting phone calls and text messages from myself and pictures and so forth and so on. Coming from somebody who's actually set foot out there in the river and seen this thing grow, it's every bit of 4 football fields long. And now that the river's back up, it doesn't look as intrusive, but for those of us that can appreciate what reduced channel capacity is, we don't want reduced channel capacity. And Michael and I have had, just get the board up to date on this, Michael and I have had some discussions on this, and I think a couple things are going to happen. Either this is going to work its way up the Yuba River, or it's going to become part of Yuba County. And either way, it's not good. Now, it would be nice if our partners in the Yuba Water Agency could help out with some of the construction costs with this, because it's my opinion, because I've been on the Yuba this year numerous times and seen the changes in that river. It's pretty easy to guess where that debris is coming and getting wedged. I mean, it's obvious. And so we've got the clock is ticking. We've got these
Permits.
Thank you. Permits that expire in April 26. And I know I've already spoken with you about this, but if we can get them on board, because they've got the deep pockets, it seems like, if they could help out with this, I think it helps everybody out. It really does. So, thank you.
Just real quick, one comment, not really for Michael or anybody, but the Synergy Energy Center deal, it's debatable whether that power plant will be operational if they don't do this kind of thing in the future, because, you know, the state of California wants to cut down carbon everywhere it can. That actually makes sense for the carbon sequestration part of it. And, you know, it's a big project, and I don't know, we'll see if they go to fruition and build this, but it looks promising to keep that plant open. And we need more clean energy power plants that are not relying on wind and solar. So, for the grid. So, anyway, what's that? I just want my AC to work. Okay. Anyway, seeing no more questions for Michael, our next meeting is September 13th, and meeting is adjourned.